Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 2008 film, Martyrs. Yes, I have gone against something I said in another video. I actually had a list video that I did saying, I think it was like 10 amazing movies that I may never watch again, or 5 or something like that. And Martyrs was on that list, but I broke that because I feel like I should have a review for it, especially when Shudder is putting so many French extremity films on their service at the moment, including Martyrs. So I watched it on Shudder, but I happen to own it. I'm not sure I'm going to keep the DVD, even though it really is a well-done film, in my opinion, as you'll hear with the way I talk about it. But it is tough to watch. You know, a lot of people have said it's just a hard-to-watch film, and I understand there's a lot of brutality to it. Obviously, this will be a spoiler-filled review, so I will talk about some of the brutality and everything. I will say that my second time around watching it was easier to handle than my first. And I think a reason for that being, you know what's coming. You can kind of, emotionally, mentally, prepare yourself for what is coming. Whereas the first time you experience it, you don't necessarily know what you're getting into. And the first time I had watched it, I definitely didn't really know what I was getting into. So the brutality hit a lot stronger. And I actually remember saying, turning to a friend who I was watching it with the first time around and saying, I really hope there's a point to all this, because this is just gratuitous. It's just over the top. And there definitely is a point, but that doesn't mean it's not hard to watch, because it is at times. Written and directed by Pascal Laugier, who also did Saint Ang, The Tall Man, Incident in a Ghostland, and actually had an acting part, a very small acting part, in the French film Brotherhood of the Wolf, which is also on Shudder. I also own on DVD and may do a review of at some point. That's a great film. Anyway, Laugier has said that he wrote the script while clinically depressed, which is why it's so hopeless and depressing. I think that's kind of become his theme for a lot of his films. I've seen this one, and I've seen Incident in a Ghostland, which I also have a review for on my channel. Don't confuse that with Prisoners of a Ghostland. That's the Nick Cage film. Incident in a Ghostland is the Pascal Laugier film. It is on Shudder at this moment, and I do recommend it. It's really good, but just like Martyrs, it is very depressing. It is very hopeless. Very good film, but also hard to watch. And you need like a palate cleanser to make you happier after that, much like you do with Martyrs. So when I watched Martyrs, I made sure that I didn't watch it at night, because I made that mistake with Incident in a Ghostland, and then I needed to make sure I stayed up even later to watch some YouTube to cleanse the mental palate, because I don't want to go to bed depressed. Just saying. So being clinically depressed, you can see that in the script. You can feel that in the way the film was executed for the most part. So yeah, I mean, it's rough. It really is rough. Apparently inspired by the film Hostel, which was about suffering, Pascal Laugier actually wanted to have a different take. And instead of being about suffering like in Hostel, it's about pain, about the actual pain, not about the suffering portion. Which, they kind of at times go hand in hand. But if you know that he kind of modeled it after Hostel to a degree, and then you watch the film, you can definitely see that in the film. You really, really can. It's reported that the two main actresses have said that they would not work with Laugier again. I actually read a interview with the woman who played Anna. I believe her name was Marjana Anawi, something like that. I have the writing of it down later in my notes, so at the end I'll talk about her more. But I read an interview with her, and she sounded like Laugier didn't really give her a whole lot to work with. And I had read something else with Laugier saying that it was hard to keep the women in the film crying, and so he needed to find ways to do that. So that, paired with what I'd researched about the film Incident in a Ghostland, where he was a bit reckless on the set with one of the actresses who ended up getting injured and had to have a lot of stitches in her face and now has a huge, horrible scar on her face. I don't think he's a great director to work with necessarily for those reasons. I mean, even Lloyd Kaufman, who makes very low-budget films and is known for making extremely low-budget films, puts a huge emphasis on safety and treating the actors and actresses well. So when I hear these types of things, it gives me pause about praising the writer-director in this case as being a great person. I mean, obviously great products, but as a person sounds problematic, potentially. Reportedly, one of the women actually broke 3 bones during filming. So with Martyrs, someone breaking 3 bones, and Incident in a Ghostland, someone needing stitches on their face. Not a great track record for Laugier. Just saying. The beginning of the film is the important backstory, but it actually is a huge attention grabber. I mean, starting out of the gate with this person running, obviously running from something, in tears, just in misery, just like frightened. And it shows the great acting immediately, but that just immediately engages you. It puts you in the overall atmosphere of the film of just like pain and suffering and awfulness and depressing and just, yeah. And then they give you all that backstory about what happened, about Lucy having been abused, and they never caught her abusers, and they don't really know where they, you know, I guess they moved the operation after the fact and everything, and then her growing up and showing her backstory of, you know, kind of being in an orphanage and then becoming friends with Anna and treating Anna as she was like really her only connection to the real world in a sense, because she seemed closed off to everyone else. So all that trust was in Anna as the only other human, because obviously if you think about what she went through, it becomes hard to trust people. You know, trauma like that really causes problems with being able to trust other people. So yeah, the backstory for Lucy and how you see a young version of her struggling is supposed to plant the seed that trauma and mental health could play a part in her fixation on the grand scheme of what happened. And for a lot of the beginning of the film, maybe the first hour, maybe a little bit less than that. Actually, a little bit less than the first hour, but a significant chunk of the film, it is in question whether Lucy is saying something that ends up being true about this family having abducted her and everything that went down, or is it just all in her head because of the trauma she went through, because, you know, she has some sort of mental illness. So they do a good job of kind of keeping that very ambiguous up until the point where that hammer falls behind the false wall, and Anna then discovers the underground basement situation where people were held and tortured for their religious-ish reasons. They do a good job of establishing the closeness of Lucy and Anna, and how Anna is basically the only person that Lucy will trust. She cannot trust anyone, but she fully puts her trust in Anna because of how they kind of bonded when they were in the orphanage. They do a good job of showing that by showing the part where Anna is speaking for Lucy to adults at the orphanage. So yeah, they do a great job of establishing that bond. And then not only does it do a good job of kind of showing you how isolated Lucy is otherwise, but it also does a good job of kind of making you care even more when Lucy ends up killing herself later, and then Anna is left there in misery, in, you know, emotional misery, because you understand at that point how strong that bond was for each of them. Showing the family that ends up being besieged in their normal everyday environment first helps convince the audience that they're just a normal, innocent family. We're just seeing the glimpse of, hey, to us viewers, they just look like regular people having a regular day, just your common family. And then everything changes. Total 180 in the film once the guy goes to, the husband goes to the door, opens it up, and there's Lucy, and she just shotgun blasts him immediately. It's like all the air gets sucked out of the audience collectively, because you didn't see things happening that abruptly. It's extremely abrupt. It's a gigantic shift, because things were very, you know, nice and jovial and tranquil with the family doing their everyday stuff, and then all of a sudden, boom, shotgun blast. And it gets worse from there, obviously, because the woman, you know, the wife gets killed, and both the kids. And once the murdering of the kids happens at the hands of Lucy is when the audience really starts even more to shift on Lucy and think maybe she is actually the villain in this, and maybe this is all just in her head. Because when she shoots the mother and father, at that point you're kind of like, okay, well, you know, maybe if she's right about what happened to her and these are the people who did it to her, they deserve that. The whole revenge thing that's very popular in film. But then once you get the kids involved and she kills them, you're kind of like, most likely they didn't know anything was going on, so they seem like they would be innocents. And that's when the audience then starts to turn on Lucy. And it's good because it then makes you have even more of like this whoa, aha type moment once it's revealed that Lucy was correct in what was going on. Taking out the kids is what makes you think Lucy is just off her rocker and the actual villain of the film, but the fact that her rampage happened so early on actually leaves a lot of time for something else to happen. And some audience members may think about that, saying, well, this is way too early for it to be resolved that she's the villain, because they kept it kind of like, they wanted you to be guessing for a little bit, so maybe there's something else to it. What seems like feral person is what I will call the woman who had been there when Lucy escaped, but she couldn't help her, but was then a child at that point. So I'll just call her the feral person. So what seems like the feral person is a crazy introduction once she shows up in it, but you wonder at first if this person is actually real or if this person's in Lucy's head. Now, obviously, they established that the person is in Lucy's head because they start showing those flashbacks of Lucy thinking to how she was about to escape. She sees this person in the same predicament and doesn't have the time to help that individual out because she needs to get out of there. She just does not have the time. So that obviously through those flashbacks is showing that it continues to weigh on her. So it's not just the trauma she's dealing with of what happened to her. It's the trauma of and the guilt of knowing that she could have prevented that happening further to someone else. It's the whole kind of survivor's guilt issue, which is a real thing. It's a very real thing. But then once they show you that she's interacting with that person, and then they show you from Anna's perspective that there's no one there, then you understand it's all in her head. And then at that point, it reinforces to the audience that you definitely feel like all this stuff was kind of in her head at that point. But then obviously that all changes with the whole hammer situation, like I talked about before. Once Anna is found helping the woman, she becomes like everybody else in Lucy's mind. That is where the relationship breaks. I talked about how strong Lucy and Anna's relationship was, and how, you know, Lucy would really only put her trust in this one human, being Anna, and then everything's just broken. It's all undone when Lucy finds Anna trying to help the mother, because she's still alive, get out of there, because it signals to Lucy that Anna believes that it's all in her head, that Anna doesn't believe her anymore. And if Anna doesn't believe Lucy, then Lucy feels like, where is the trust? The trust is gone. And she's totally disconnected at that point from all of humanity. And that's why everything seems terrible and pointless to her at that point. And that's why she ultimately does the whole thing where she slits her own throat, which, by the way, looked great. I mean, it's a weird thing to say because it's really heartbreaking and really terrible and gross at that moment, but the way it was shot in the rain with the slit in slow motion, with the music that was playing, with the reaction from Anna at the same time, it captures the atmosphere it was supposed to capture. It captures the emotion, the depressing nature of it very, very well, and it just looks really, really good in my opinion. Once the secret staircase is found, that's when it all gets flipped on its head, basically. Oh, also another thing to say about the part where Lucy kills herself, real quick. The fact of how she kills herself and the way the scene is shot becomes even more heartbreaking when you realize that she was correct about everything. So it kind of makes you reflect back on that and be like, that makes it even worse and even more heartbreaking. But yeah, the secret staircase. But my question is, if you were Anna in that instance and you find this secret staircase going down into this very dark place, and then you see these giant pictures of women in death, like right before they're dying in terrible situations, do you go down there? And then even if you go down there, once you see those images, do you keep going? Not me. I would be out of there. I would be calling the police. I mean, I understand in this instance she is tied into these murders, but in that instance, I would still not go down in there, because at that point, Anna should be thinking, okay, maybe she's correct, and then she should also be thinking, are there still other people here? Which, obviously, they're not there at that point, but they do show up, so Anna could have gotten out of there. But then we wouldn't have the movie, would we? And when they reveal the captive woman, you feel even worse for Lucy, because you realize that Lucy was correct. That is a big, big moment. Anna taking the metal headpiece off of the woman is actually pretty intense, not to mention very gruesome. Probably one of the toughest parts to watch of the film, because they show it very close up with her just like, I think it's like a screwdriver, just like trying to wrench these gigantic, thick staples out of the woman's skull. Ugh, pretty nasty. Plenty of blood, too. They made it look good. Not quite sure the purpose of the feral woman's freak out right before she ends up being shot by the new group of people, the people in black who show up. Now, my thought initially was, I don't really understand the purpose for showing her having this freak out, except maybe to focus the audience on that so much that when she gets shot, it becomes more of like this abrupt kind of surprise. But also, it kind of ties in later when the woman who's the leader of this organization of the people in black ends up saying that she was kind of like having hallucinations and thinking that like insects were all over. So that's why I think she was kind of like rubbing her head on the wall and like trying to take her skin off with a knife, basically. So yeah. It kind of shows that like she was one of those failed experiments. They were trying to get people to like true martyrdom by like having this kind of religious moment from all the pain, having this kind of religious breakthrough. But in people like that woman who ended up getting shot and had that freak out moment, it shows that she was a failed experiment, because instead it actually just made her lose her mind. And so it also gave you the idea that this has been done many times with without the result that they were actually looking for. And then Anna obviously ends up becoming that huge breakthrough that they've been trying for I think they said 17 years or something like that. But yeah. As soon as the people in black show up and end up grabbing Anna, you know that she's in for it. And you know that she's in for exactly what you saw. What she was trying to save that woman she found from, you know that's exactly where Anna is headed. And obviously it goes even further than that. It is a bit different, and it's worse, obviously. And you see it all, which is what's tough. The old lady explains the entire purpose of what's going on, which is the point that you realize there's an actual reason for the brutality in the film. And that is good, because it kind of primes you for you're about to endure something as a viewer, just like Anna is about to endure something on screen. There is a point to this. You will come out on the other end, just like Anna ends up coming out on the other end in a way. And it was all for this purpose. The real endurance begins about 70 minutes into the film and serves to mentally and emotionally put the audience through what Anna is physically going through. So that is a big purpose for how this film was executed. Yes, they could have shown a lot less of the brutality and the terrible things that Anna goes through, but it wouldn't have the same impact. And by showing it the way that they do, by showing it for as long as they do, it is mentally and emotionally putting the audience through so much at the same time that Anna is going through so much mentally, emotionally, and physically. So it's a way to further connect with that character, and the performance is what sells it the most, and that's the performance of Marjana Alawi, which she's a Moroccan actress, and I believe she had said in the interview that I'd read that this was like, I think her first film she was in, or one of her first films. She was a very new actress. So the fact that her performance was as good as it was, and that's an insanely demanding role, she did an excellent, excellent, excellent job. Notice that the music does a 180 turn about 80 minutes into the film. This is when Anna seems to have her breakthrough to comfort with the pain, a certain level of comfort with the pain and suffering, And then she's actually even treated a little bit differently by the captors at that point. Up until that point, they'd just been treating her very coldly and just abusing her. After that point, they obviously continue to abuse her, but they start to look at her and treat her in a respectful manner. You know, they have to keep things going to get to their goal they're going to, but yeah. But also note that the music changes at that point, and it's supposed to be this auditory signal to the audience that there's been a shift in how Anna is experiencing things. And she's broken through that wall, basically, that the woman was kind of explaining needing to break through with someone for true martyrdom. Anna being flayed is not a level you expect in the film, and that it's going to reach that, but it does, and that becomes very uncomfortable, very crazy. It just goes above and beyond with the brutality. I think the visualization of Anna's kind of like transcendental moment where it kind of like goes into her eye and you see like that white stuff kind of like it's kind of like religious moment type thing. I think that's over the top. It's definitely too over the top. You really didn't need it. I mean, just showing the look on her face was enough to show you what was going on in her head. To actually then like go in her eye and like show you what's going on in her head. It's just too much. It seemed a little dumb and hokey in my opinion. So I could have done without that. I didn't like that. The end where the old woman kills herself probably makes a lot of people mad because they want a clear answer on what was said to her. She keeps, and then she also does say before she kills herself to that guy, Etienne, keep doubting is what she says. So either what's after death is terrible, which is why she's saying this, or there's actually nothing and all the awful things that they did were for nothing. So I viewed it as she's either taking herself out because her life's work basically was for nothing, and she wants her followers to still believe in something and keep things going, or what is after death is horrible, and she just did not want to let people know about that because then you would be dreading death so much. So by not sharing what she was told, she's kind of keeping the dream alive in a sense for these people, because it's obviously they put a lot of hope and interest into that, which I think this ends up for that reason kind of speaking a lot to religion in general. And I think it is a bit of a scathing film about religion in a sense. Good choice to have the end credits silent as it rolls. No music, no noise, nothing. It's just silence. This leaves the audience with the gravity of what they just experienced with the film. Not just the very end of it, but the entirety of the film, to just think back and reflect. So I like that choice. Wonderful choice. All the quick cuts and frantic camera movement, especially earlier on in the film, is enough to kind of make you nauseous at times. It actually did start to make me nauseous at times. So I wish that was kind of like taken back. It was warranted to a degree because it's intense, things, crazy things are happening. So like it's warranted, but at the same time, when you have so much of it with all the quick cuts and the cameras like just moving all the time, and even in like stationary shots like still moving a lot and being shaky, yeah, it's nausea inducing. It really, really is, and that's rough. But then at the same time, I guess that kind of works in favor of the overall feeling that the audience member has watching the film, because it's disgusting, it's brutal, it's terrible, it doesn't make you feel good, so it's potentially making you sick to your stomach because of the nausea-inducing camera movement. So here are a few definitions that I think are important to the film. Martyr. A person who is killed because of their religious or other beliefs. Now in this instance, it's a little bit different because it's actually a person who is killed not for her beliefs, but for the beliefs of other people. So it's an interesting kind of take on the word martyr. And also take note that the woman who's the head of that organization makes a distinction between victim and martyr, and that martyr is what they're looking for so that they can get the answer about what's after death, but everyone else who was kind of their failed experiment was just a victim, and that's what they were disappointed by. Transfiguration is another definition, because transfigured is a term that's used. A complete change of form or appearance into a more beautiful or spiritual state. And that's what the woman says, is that when the people have that kind of religious breakthrough, basically, they are transfigured. They become more beautiful. They become in a better state, in essence. And that's what Anna ends up reaching. This film does not succeed without the wonderful performance by Marjana Alawi. Hopefully I said that right. Probably didn't, but my apologies. Her performance alone is what sells the film. Obviously, there are other great performances that were very important to the film, but if her performance was not what it was, the film does not do as well. This could be a rebuke of religion, as it shows a religious leader seeking answers and ultimately leaving her congregation with none of those answers, even though she personally got those answers. Because religion, in my opinion, this is just my personal opinion, and you can feel free to say, you know, whatever you want about it, because I realize that there are a lot of different opinions on religion and specific religions, so you can go ahead and respectfully talk with me about it in the comments. But my personal opinion is that religion is just kind of gives people a structure to live by and is kind of giving people hope, but not really giving them actual answers to stuff. Giving what people believe are answers, but not real answers. And I kind of viewed this film, the organization in this film, that woman in particular, was kind of doing that. She created her own religion around pain and was, you know, going for this end goal of getting this, you know, answer what's after death, because every human wants to know what comes after life. And a lot of people in religion, you know, they feel like they have that answer. I personally don't, which is scary. I will be honest. It is scary. And there are a lot of times that I wish I was religious for that reason. But I don't want to go too far down that road, just saying. So overall, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I think this is a 4-star film. It is really good. I know a lot of people, it's hard to watch. So it's also hard for people to kind of separate how tough it is to watch with how good it actually is of a film. So 4 stars, which is a great rating. I don't give 4s out very easily on this channel. So yeah. But would love to know your feelings about the film. Go ahead and put it down in the comments, or if you just want to talk about horror in general. Always down to listen to differing opinions on whatever, because I like hearing from other perspectives, and then that helps me actually consider some things that I haven't thought about. And sometimes I change my opinion on things based off that. So let's have a good, meaningful dialogue. Respectfully, obviously. Anyway, do me a quick favor, hit subscribe if you haven't already. It is quick, it is painless, it costs you no money, and it is literally the best way to keep me motivated and say thank you to me to keep me doing these videos, because there's a lot of time and effort that goes into it. And when I'm doing this review video, I'm not making money doing this, so I need some sort of motivation. You know, obviously the creativity aspect is motivation, but it helps when I see people subscribing. So anyway, thank you for that. Also hit the notification bell button and you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing usually no less than 4 a week. But regardless, thank you so much for taking your time to watch this. Until next time, keep it brutal.